I always believed theft was a violent act, something loud like shattered glass or a kicked-in door. But when the notification lit up my phone on a Tuesday morning, I learned that the worst kind of robbery is silent. $20,000 of my hard-earned savings had vanished in a single scheduled transfer. My father called it a simple misunderstanding. I called it the first act of a war I never asked to fight. The highway leading back to Briar Glen was a ribbon of gray asphalt, cutting through a wall of green pines that seemed to lean inward. As if trying to reclaim the road, I had driven this route 100 times in my mind before I actually turned the key in the ignition of my sedan. 33 years of life had taught me that geography was not just about location, it was about memory. And for me, Briar Glen was not just a town on a map of North Carolina, it was a museum of unresolved tensions. I had spent the last 5 years carefully constructing a life that did not require my parents' approval. I had a career in Charlotte that paid my bills, a circle of friends who knew me as Alice the capable strategist, and a quiet apartment where the air was never thick with unsaid things. But a family milestone is a gravitational force. My parents were celebrating their 40th anniversary, a number that sounded impressive on cardstock, but felt heavy when I thought about the reality of the marriage it represented. I parked my car in the driveway of the house I grew up in. The gravel crunched under my tires, a sound that instantly transported me back to being 16 and trying to sneak out without waking the house. The structure was a sprawling brick colonial that looked exactly as it had 10 years ago, manicured and imposing. It was a house that demanded good behavior. I took a breath, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. I looked like a woman who was bracing herself for a fight she had promised herself she would not start. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and slow-cooked pot roast. My mother, Marianne Hughes, met me at the door. She was a woman who vibrated with a nervous energy that she tried to mask with aggressive hospitality. "Alice, you made it," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a restraint than an embrace. The traffic must have been terrible. "Come in. Your father is in the den." The mention of my father, Gordon Hughes, tightened a screw at the base of my neck. Gordon was a man who took up all the oxygen in a room without raising his voice. He was a retired district judge, a man who believed that love was a reward for correctness, not a birthright. I walked into the den. He was sitting in his leather armchair, swirling a glass of amber liquid. He did not stand up when I entered. He just looked at me over the rim of his glasses, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he were assessing a defendant. "You are late, Alice," he said. The ice in his glass clinked. "Traffic," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is good to see you." "Dad," he grunted, a sound that could have meant anything, and turned his attention back to the television. This was the dance. I would offer politeness, and he would offer indifference. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I was an adult woman who paid her own mortgage. But the child inside me still wanted him to look at me and see something worth smiling about. Dinner was a performance. The dining room table was set with the good china, the pieces with the gold rim that we were forbidden to touch as children. My older brother, delicate and favored, was not there. He was away on business in London. The golden boy who could do no wrong even from across an ocean. That left me as the sole representative of the next generation. My mother chattered about the neighbors, the church committee, and the new landscaping at the club. She was filling the silence, terrified of what might grow in the quiet spaces. I focused on cutting my roast beef into precise squares. "So, Alice," Gordon said, his voice cutting through my mother's monologue about hydrangeas, "Marianne tells me you decided not to take that promotion, the one in Atlanta." I put my fork down. I did not decline it. "Dad, I deferred it. The timing was not right for a move. I have a lease, and my current team is in the middle of a massive merger." He smiled. But it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who has just found the loose thread he intends to pull. "Deferred," he repeated, tasting the word. "That is a gentle word for quitting before you start. You know, your brother would have packed his bags the night they offered the job. He has that drive, that hunger. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. I have drive. I just also have a life here that I value. Gordon laughed. A short, dry bark. You value safety. You always have. You tiptoe around your life like you are afraid you are going to break it. Gordon, please, my mother said, her voice thin. Let us have a nice dinner. It is a celebration. I am just making an observation. Marianne, he said, turning his cold eyes to her before snapping them back to me. It is fascinating, really. You look at our family history. Generations of men and women who built things, who took risks, and then there is Alice. I gripped the edge of the table, the wood dug into my palms. I am right here. Dad, you do not have to talk about me like I am a case study. He leaned forward, and the candlelight caught the hard lines of his face. I am talking to you. Alice, I am telling you that you lack the instinct, the gut. You get that from somewhere else, because you certainly do not have Hugh's blood. The room went absolute silent. It was not a joke. He did not say it with a wink. He said it with a calm, terrifying certainty. My mother dropped her fork. It clattered against the china. A gunshot in the quiet room. Gordon, she whispered, that is enough. Gordon just picked up his wineglass and took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine. He looked satisfied. He had drawn blood without lifting a finger. Everyone at the table, my aunt, my uncle. My mother stared at their plates. They pretended they had not heard it. They pretended that a father telling his daughter she did not belong to him was just normal dinner conversation. But I heard it, and more importantly, I saw my mother's face. She was not angry at him for being cruel. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking so bad that she had to hide them in her lap. Her face had drained of color, leaving her looking gray and small. That was the moment the ground shifted. For years, I had thought my father was just a hard man to please. I thought I was the disappointment because I was not a boy, or because I was not brilliant enough. But looking at Marianne Hughes trembling in her chair, I realized the rot went deeper. I stood up. I did not scream. I did not throw my drink. I just stood up. I think I'm going to turn in. I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. Alice, you have not finished, my mother said, her voice pleading. There is cake. I am not hungry. I said. I walked out of the dining room, feeling my father's gaze on my back like a physical weight. He did not call me back. He let me go. I went to the guest room, the room that used to be mine before I left for college. It was a shrine to a girl I barely recognized anymore. Debate trophies on the shelf, generic art on the walls. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the beige carpet. You do not have Hugh's blood. It played on a loop in my head. He had said it to hurt me. He had said it to make me feel small. But what if he had said it because it was true? I thought about the differences. My brother was tall, fair, and sharp-featured like Gordon. I was darker, rounder, my eyes a shade of brown that no one else in the family seemed to have. I had always been told I took after a great aunt on my mother's side, a woman who died before I was born. It was a convenient explanation. I needed air. I needed to speak to someone who was not part of the Hughes delusion. I texted Tessa Lane, "Are you working tonight?" The reply came 3 minutes later, break in 10, meet me at the bench. Tessa had been my best friend since kindergarten. She stayed in Briar Glen, became a nurse, and saw the town from the inside out. She worked at Briar Glen Regional, the same hospital where I was born. I drove to the hospital, parking in the visitor lot. The night air was thick and humid, clinging to my skin. I found Tessa sitting on a bench near the emergency room entrance, smoking a cigarette she was trying to hide. "Rough night?" she asked, looking at my face. "You have no idea." I said. I sat down next to her and told her everything. I told her about the dinner, the tension, and the way Gordon had looked when he said those words. Tessa listened, exhaling a plume of smoke into the darkness. When I finished, she did not offer empty platitudes. She was a nurse. She dealt in blood and facts. "Your dad is a bastard." "Alice," she said, "but we knew that. It felt different this time. "Tess," I said. It was not just an insult. It felt like an accusation. And my mom, she looked like she was going to pass out. She looked guilty. Tessa stubbed out her cigarette on the concrete. "Look, this is Briar Glen. Every family has secrets. But if you are asking me if it is possible, well, anything is possible." I looked at her. "Is there anything weird about the records? You work in records sometimes." Tessa hesitated. She looked around, making sure we were alone. "There are always rumors," she said quietly, "especially about the late 80s. The administration back then was messy. There were stories about files getting misplaced, birth certificates being amended later than usual, but that is just bureaucratic incompetence. Alice, it does not mean you were switched at birth or something. I am not thinking switched at birth." I said, "I am thinking my mother had a life I know nothing about." Tessa reached out and squeezed my hand. "If you want to know, really know, you do not need hospital records. The science is $20 and a tube of spit away." I nodded. I knew she was right, but the thought of it made my stomach turn. Taking a DNA test felt like pointing a gun at my own history. "Do it," Tessa said. "Order the kit. Worst case scenario. You prove he is just a mean old man, and you are a Hughes through and through. Best case. You get free?" I drove back to the house in a daze. Everyone was asleep. The house was a tomb. I crept up the stairs, avoiding the creaky step on the landing out of muscle memory. I could not sleep. I paced the guest room, my mind racing. I needed to feel grounded. I decided to go into the attic. My grandmother's things were stored up there. She had passed away 4 years ago, and she was the only person in this house who had ever made me feel completely safe. Maybe being near her things would calm me down. The attic was stiflingly hot and smelled of cedar and dust. I pulled the chain on the single bulb, illuminating stacks of boxes. I found the ones labeled with her distinct, looping handwriting. I opened a box of books and old letters. I was just sifting through, looking for nothing in particular, when my hand brushed against a thick manila envelope taped to the bottom of a photo album. I pulled it free, on the front, in my grandmother's writing. It said, "For Alice when you are ready." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had never seen this before. No one had ever mentioned it. I sat down on the dusty floorboards and carefully pried the clasp open. My hands were shaking. I expected a letter, a deed, a confession. I reached inside. Nothing. I turned the envelope upside down and shook it. Nothing fell out. It was empty. I stared at the empty space inside the paper. The adhesive on the flap was old and dried out, but it looked like it had been resealed at some point with clear tape that had yellowed. Someone had found this before me. Someone had opened it, taken whatever my grandmother wanted me to see, and put the empty envelope back. The betrayal felt physical, a punch to the gut. Was it my mother? My father? When had they done it? I went back downstairs. The empty envelope tucked into the waistband of my pajamas. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, drafting 2 versions of my future. In version 1, I took the test, and the data proved I was Gordon Hughes' daughter. I would shove the paper in his face. I would demand an apology he would never give. In version 2, the screen would load, and it would say 0% shared DNA. And I would be an orphan with living parents. I would be a stranger in my own life. The next morning, I ordered the kit. I had it expedited to a P.O. box in town, so it would not arrive at the house. When I came down for breakfast, the atmosphere had shifted. Gordon was in the kitchen, making coffee. Usually, he expected Marianne to serve him, but today, he was standing by the pot, humming. "Good morning, kiddo," he said when I walked in. I stopped in the doorway. Kiddo. He had not called me that since I was 10. "Morning," I said, eyeing him warily. "Coffee?" he asked. "It is fresh." "Sure." He poured a mug and handed it to me. He was smiling. It was a tight, practiced smile. I was thinking. He said, "Your car is making a funny noise." "The idle is rough. Why do we not pop the hood later? I can take a look. Save you a trip to the mechanic." I held the warm mug, feeling the disconnect. 12 hours ago, He had told me I did not have his blood. Now he wanted to fix my car. He was trying to smooth it over. He was trying to act like the benevolent father. It felt like a performance. It felt like he was managing a witness. I am fine. Dad, I said, I think it is just the humidity. Suit yourself, he said, shrugging. Just trying to help. He walked out to the patio, whistling. I watched him go. He was not acting like a man who regretted his harsh words. He was acting like a man who was afraid he had said too much and was trying to bury the evidence under a layer of charm. I spent the afternoon digging. If the envelope was empty, I had to find the truth somewhere else. I pulled down the family photo albums from the bookshelf in the den. Marianne loved these albums. They were chronological, meticulously labeled. I flipped to 1988, the year I was born. There were photos of Marianne in the hospital bed, looking exhausted but perfect. Photos of Gordon holding a bundle. I looked closer. In the pictures of my brother, born 4 years earlier. He was wrapped in a blue blanket with a distinctive stork pattern. The background showed a sign that said, Maternity Ward A. I flipped to my newborn photos. I was wrapped in a plain white blanket with a harsh pink stripe. No storks. And in the background of one grainy shot, over Gordon's shoulder, there was a blurry sign on the wall. I squinted. It did not say maternity. It looked like it said emergency. Why would a healthy newborn be in the emergency wing, or was it a different hospital entirely? I took a picture of the photo with my phone. Zooming in as much as I could, the blanket texture was different, too, coarser. I heard footsteps and slammed the album shut. Marianne walked in, carrying a basket of laundry. Just reminiscing, she asked, her voice high and tight. Just looking. I said, Mom, which room were you in when you had me? She froze. Her knuckles turned white on the laundry basket. Oh, Alice, that was 30 years ago. Who remembers room numbers? You remembered with the boys. I said, you always talk about the view of the park from the window when Michael was born. Well, it was a long labor with you, she said, turning away to start folding towels that were already folded. It is all a blur. I was just happy you were healthy. She was lying. I could hear it in the speed of her words. She wanted out of this conversation. I let her go. I had what I needed. A discrepancy. A crack in the story. That night, the heat broke, and a thunderstorm rolled over Briar Glen. Thunder shook the house. I was awake, reading on my tablet, when I heard raised voices coming from the master bedroom down the hall. I slipped out of bed and crept into the hallway. The door to their room was cracked open an inch. I stood in the shadows, holding my breath. You promised me, Gordon's voice hissed. You promised me it was buried. It is buried, Marianne whispered. She is just asking questions. She is curious. She is not curious. She is suspicious, Gordon snapped. And whose fault is that? You coddle her. You make her feel like she is special. She is not special. Marianne, she is a liability. Stop it, Marianne sobbed. She is my daughter. Is she? Gordon said. His voice dropped lower, deadly quiet. Because every time I look at her, I see him. I see the mess you made. And I see the paperwork we had to forge to clean it up. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop the gasp. Forge, paperwork. This was not just an affair. This was criminal. This was illegal adoption, or kidnapping, or something so dark they had to break the law to make me a Hughes. We have to get her out of here, Gordon said, before she finds the rest of it. Get her back to Charlotte. Tell her we are renovating. I do not care. Just get her gone. I backed away, step by silent step, until I was safe in my room. I locked the door. I sat on the floor, shivering despite the humidity. They were not my parents, not really. They were my captors. They were two people who had conspired to build a lie and trap me inside it. The next 3 days were a blur of agonizing waiting. I played the part. I ate the meals. I smiled at the neighbors. I let Gordon fix my car, watching his hands work on the engine, wondering if those hands had signed the forged papers. I checked my email every hour. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon, the notification popped up. Your DNA results are ready. I was in the parking lot of the grocery store on Main Street, I had gone out to buy milk. Just to escape the house, I put the car in park. I turned off the engine. The silence inside the car was deafening. My phone sat on the passenger seat. The screen was black. I reached for it. My hand hovered. I realized then that I was not afraid of being rejected by Gordon. I was not afraid of losing the Hughes name. I hated the Hughes name. I was afraid of the blank space. If I was not Alice Hughes, who was I? Was I anyone? Did I have a mother out there looking for me? Or was I just a mistake that needed to be covered up? I picked up the phone. I unlocked the screen. I tapped the app. The loading circle spun, round and round. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I was done being the careful project manager. I was done being the peacekeeper. I looked at the screen, and the truth looked back at me. Driving to Briar Hollow felt less like visiting family and more like crossing a border into a hostile nation. The development was one of those new, aggressively manicured neighborhoods where the lawns looked like green carpet and the houses were swollen. Beige monuments to debt. My father, Martin, had lived in a sensible 2-bedroom ranch for 20 years. Now, he lived here, in a 5-bedroom fortress with columns that served no structural purpose and a driveway wide enough to land a small plane. I parked my sedan behind a moving truck that was still idling in the cul-de-sac. The house number, 2410, was etched in faux gold script on a boulder near the mailbox. It was ostentatious. It was loud. It was everything my father was not. I checked my phone before getting out. No new notifications from the bank. The silence from the fraud department was making my skin itch. I had filed the initial claim, frozen the remaining funds, and now I was stuck in the purgatory of processing times. But I was not going to sit in my condo and wait for a form letter. I was here to see the crime scene, even if it was disguised as a housewarming tour. The front door swung open before I even reached the porch steps. Celeste stood there, framed by the entryway, wearing a white linen dress that looked tailored. She had a way of standing that suggested she was posing for an audience I could not see. "Aubrey!" she exclaimed, her voice pitching up into that performative register she used for company. "Look at you. You look tired. Honey, have you been sleeping?" I walked up the steps, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack the enamel on my teeth. "I am fine. Celeste," I said, "just busy with work. The house looks big." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "It is a lot of space," she admitted, stepping back to let me in. But Martin needed a fresh start. You know how cramped that old place was. It was depressing him. Here, he can breathe. I stepped into the foyer. The smell of fresh paint and expensive vanilla candles hit me instantly. The floors were dark hardwood, gleaming under a crystal chandelier that looked too heavy for the ceiling. "It must be expensive to heat," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Celeste waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, we are being so careful. You know me. Aubrey, I am a hawk with the budget. I found this chandelier at an estate sale, practically stole it, and the curtains I hemmed them myself. We are pinching every penny." I looked at the curtains. They were heavy silk, lined, with weighted hems. They were not DIY. They were custom. I followed her into the living room, where the furniture was arranged like a showroom. Cream sofas, glass tables, abstract art that matched the throw pillows perfectly. It did not look lived in. It looked staged. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "He is in the garage, fiddling with his tools," she said. "He is so happy to have a real workspace. Come, look at the kitchen. That is the real showstopper." The kitchen was massive. An island the size of a billboard sat in the center, topped with marble that I knew cost more than my first car. The appliances were professional-grade stainless steel. I leaned against the counter, my eyes scanning the room. Celeste was talking about the backsplash. Something about hand-fired tile from Italy, but my attention snagged on a stack of papers sitting on the far end of the island. Most of it was junk mail, but protruding from the bottom was a thick blue folder. The corner of the folder had a logo stamped in silver foil, a stylized tree and the words, "West Creek Title." I recognized the name. I had seen it on a billboard on the highway. I took a step toward it. reaching out as if to admire the granite. "Is this the closing paperwork?" I asked casually. "I have been thinking about refinancing my place. I was wondering who you used." Celeste moved with a speed that startled me. She crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and snatched the folder off the counter before my fingers could graze it. She clutched it to her chest, her smile never faltering, but her eyes were hard. "Oh, this is just boring admin stuff," she said. "You do not want to use these people. Aubrey, they were a nightmare. So disorganized. I would not recommend them to my worst enemy. I'm just about to file this away so Martin does not have to look at it. He gets so stressed by the paperwork. You know." She opened a drawer and shoved the folder inside, closing it with a sharp thud. I kept my face blank. Why would you hide a folder from a disorganized company unless the paperwork inside contradicted the story you were telling? "Right," I said. "Dad always did hate the fine print." Celeste exhaled, smoothing her dress. "Exactly. That is why I handle it. I try to take the burden off him. He has worked hard enough his whole life. He deserves to just enjoy the house." She turned to the refrigerator. "Can I get you a water? Or maybe some wine? I think we have a bottle of Chardonnay open." "Water is fine," I said. While she had her back turned, I scanned the room again. On top of the refrigerator, pushed back toward the wall, was a cardboard box that had not been unpacked. It had a white label on the side. I memorized the text on the label. "Master bed. Linens. Mover Fast Track Logistics. Job order. 8842. I took the glass of water she handed me and took a sip. "It is a beautiful kitchen." "Celeste," I said, "you have done a lot with it in a short time." She beamed, the tension in her shoulders dropping an inch. "Thank you. Aubrey, we just want it to be a place where the whole family gathers. A legacy." I finished the water quickly. "I need to say hi to Dad before I head out." I said, "I have an early meeting tomorrow." "He is just through that door," she said, pointing to the mudroom. "Do not let him keep you too long. He will talk your ear off about shelving units." I walked into the garage. My father was standing at a workbench, organizing a set of wrenches. He looked smaller in this cavernous space. The garage was huge, 3 bays wide, and empty except for his sedan and a wall of boxes. "Hey, Dad," I said. He jumped, dropping a wrench. It clanged loudly against the concrete. "Aubrey," he said, turning around, his face flushed. "I did not hear you come in." I walked over and hugged him. He felt thin. "Place looks great." "Dad," I said. He looked around, his expression vague. Yes, it is nice. A bit much, maybe, but Celeste loves it. She has such an eye for these things. She says you are happy." I said, watching him closely. "I am," he said. He picked up the wrench and started wiping it with a rag. Not meeting my eyes. It is a fresh start. That is what we needed. I looked at the boxes stacked against the wall. They were all labeled with the same moving company name I had seen in the kitchen, Fast Track Logistics. But there was another box, set apart from the others, sitting on a folding chair. It was an open box of files. I stepped closer to it. "Dad, is this the old tax stuff?" I asked. "I thought we shredded that." He looked up, panic flickering in his eyes. "Oh, do not touch that. Celeste is organizing the filing system. She has a system. She does not want anyone messing it up." I stepped back. "Okay, I will let you get back to it." I left 5 minutes later. As I walked down the driveway to my car, I pulled out my phone. I had not taken a picture of the folder in the kitchen, that would have been too obvious, but I had something better. I walked past the open garage door one last time, pretending to check my tire. I held my phone low against my leg and snapped 3 rapid photos of the boxes stacked near the entrance. I got in my car and drove 2 blocks away before pulling over. I zoomed in on the photos. The labels were clear, Fast Track Logistics, but on one of the boxes, someone had written a name in black marker, seemingly a note for the movers on who to contact. Contact J. Miller, 555-0199. I typed the number into my search bar. It linked to a real estate broker named Jason Miller. I sat there in the idling car and spent 20 minutes digging into Jason Miller. His professional headshot showed a man with a wide smile and a cheap suit. I scrolled past his own website and went straight to the review aggregators. The pattern was immediate. 1 star, unresponsive after closing, 1 star, surprise fees at signing, 2 stars. He got the deal done. But the paperwork was a mess. We are still fixing errors 6 months later. 1 star. Felt rushed. He did not explain the terms. He was a volume broker. The kind who pushed paper through fast and loose, relying on the fact that most people are too intimidated by legal jargon to ask questions. He was exactly the kind of person Celeste would use. The next morning, I sat in a glass-walled office at my bank's downtown branch. Across from me sat Mrs. Higgins, a fraud specialist who looked like she had seen every scam in the book and was impressed by none of them. She turned her monitor so I could see it. "Okay, Ms. Barnes," she said, "we have traced the authorization. As we discussed on the phone, the transfer of $20,000 was initiated via our secure online portal on the 14th. I nodded. "I did not initiate it. I was at work. I can prove I was in a meeting." Mrs. Higgins tapped a key. "That is not the issue. The issue is that the login credentials were correct. Username, password, and the two-factor authentication code." My stomach dropped. Two-factor. "That comes to my phone, or your email," she said, "depending on how your preferences are set." She pulled up a document on the screen. It was a digital copy of an authorization form. At the bottom was a signature. It was my signature, not a clumsy forgery. It had the loop on the A and the sharp strike on the S that I had developed in college. It looked exactly like the signature on my driver's license. I stared at it. "That looks real," I whispered. "It was uploaded as a PDF." Mrs. Higgins said, "Along with a copy of your license, the IP address used to access the account does not match your usual home or work IP. It traces back to a public library in Briar Hollow. But here's the interesting part," Mrs. Higgins continued. "The confirmation email for this transfer did not go to your primary address. It went to this one." She pointed to an email address on the screen. "Aubrey Barnes, secure Gmail. I frowned. That is not my email. I have never seen that address in my life. Mrs. Higgins leaned back. "It was added to your profile 3 weeks ago. The verification link was clicked immediately. Whoever did this had access to your primary email long enough to approve the change, and then they deleted the notification so you would not see it." I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. 3 weeks ago, I had been at a family barbecue at my dad's old house. I had left my phone on the kitchen counter while I played cornhole in the yard. Celeste had been in the kitchen making potato salad. They changed the contact info. Mrs. Higgins said, then they waited. They let the system reset. Then they logged in, authorized the transfer using the new email for the code, and uploaded a signature they likely lifted from another document. This was not a hack. Ms. Barnes, this was an impersonation. I left the bank with a file of printouts and a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. I sat in my car and pulled up my credit monitoring app. I had checked it last week, but I needed to look deeper. I went to the inquiries section. There it was, a soft pull. Inquiry date, October 12th. Entity Apex Lending Solutions. October 12th was 2 days before the money moved. I dialed the number for Apex Lending. I navigated through 3 automated menus until I got a human being. "This is Aubrey Barnes," I said, my voice steady. "I see an inquiry from your firm on my credit report. I did not apply for a loan with you. I want to know what this is." The representative clicked away on a keyboard. "One moment. Ms. Barnes, yes, I see a file here. It looks like an application was started for a personal line of credit. $50,000. 50,000? Was it approved?" I asked. "No," the rep said. "The application was abandoned before completion." They entered the social, the address, and the income, but they stopped at the employment verification step, since it was not submitted. "It just shows as a soft inquiry. It won't affect your score." I hung up. It was a test run. Someone was checking to see if my credit was frozen. They were checking to see if I was eligible for more money. They entered my social. They entered my income. They stopped at employment verification because they knew they could not fake a call to my HR department. I drove to Nadia's apartment. Nadia Kerr had been my best friend since college. She was a cynical, sharp-edged woman who worked in data security, if anyone could talk me down. It was her. I sat on her couch and laid the papers out on the coffee table. The photo of the broker's box, the printout of the fake email address, the notes from the lender call. Nadia picked up the paper with the email address, a fake address that looked like mine. "That is lazy," she said, "but effective. It is fraud." I said, "It is straight-up identity theft." Nadia looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Aubrey, listen to me. Random hackers do not create a fake email that looks like yours. They do not go to a library in your father's town, and they definitely do not know your signature well enough to forge it perfectly." She tapped the paper. "This is not a stranger. This is someone who knows your birthday. Someone who knows your mother's maiden name for the security questions. Someone who knows where you bank." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "Someone who had access to your phone for 5 minutes at a barbecue." "I know," I whispered. "It is Celeste." Nadia nodded. "It is Celeste, and she is not just stealing money. She is setting up a profile. She tested the credit line. She moved the savings. She is seeing how much of you she can hollow out before you notice. But why, I asked, why risk it if she gets caught? She goes to jail. People like that do not think they will get caught," Nadia said. "They think they can explain it away." "Oh, it was a misunderstanding. Oh, Aubrey said I could." "She is banking on the fact that you won't put your father's wife in handcuffs." "She is right," I said, feeling the bitterness rise in my throat. "I can't arrest her without destroying him." "Then you have to get him to see it," Nadia said. "You have to isolate him." I texted Martin. "Meet me for coffee. Just us. Please." He replied an hour later. "Okay, Tuesday, the cafe near my office." The cafe was a noisy industrial place with exposed brick and overpriced espresso. Martin was sitting at a small table in the corner, nursing a black coffee. He looked tired. The circles under his eyes were dark purple bruises. I sat down across from him. I did not buy a drink. "Hey, Dad," I said. He gave me a weak smile. "Hey, honey. It is nice to see you. Celeste wanted to come, but I told her we needed some father-daughter time." "Good," I said, "because we need to talk about the house and the money." Martin winced. "Aubrey, please, can we not? I know you are upset about the mix-up with the account. Celeste is looking into it. She thinks it might be a banking error." "It is not a banking error." "Dad," I said, keeping my voice low. "I went to the bank. I saw the signature. It was authorized." Martin shifted in his seat. He looked down at his coffee cup. "Well, maybe. Maybe we discussed it. And I forgot. You know how my memory is lately." "Your memory is fine," I said firmly. "Dad, look at me." He looked up. His eyes were swimming with a mixture of fear and loyalty. "Why did you buy that house?" I asked. "You did not want to move. You loved the old garden." He sighed. A long, deflating sound. "Celeste. She really wanted it. She said it was time for us to have something that reflected our status." "Status?" I asked. "You are a retired mechanic. Dad, you do not care about status." "She cares," he said softly. "She feels like she is always coming in second place. She talks about her son, Kevin. You know Kevin is struggling. He is 30 years old and still living in rentals. Celeste says it is not fair that you are so established, so successful, and Kevin has nothing." I felt a flash of anger. "I worked for what I have. Dad, Kevin has nothing because Kevin spends his money on sports cars he can't afford." "I know," Martin said. "I know. But Celeste, she gets in a mood. She says we need to balance the scales. She says since you are so stable, you should be willing to help the family, that the house is an investment for everyone." I leaned forward. "Did she tell you that taking my money was helping the family?" Martin closed his eyes. "She brought me papers, Aubrey, stacks of them. It was late. I was tired. She said, Sign here. Sign here. It is just standard closing forms. She said, Don't worry your head about the math. Martin, I handled it. And you signed them, I asked. Without reading, he looked at me, and I saw the shame burning in his face. It was the shame of a man who knows he has lost control of his own life. I did not want to look stupid. He whispered, She uses all these words: equity, riders, amortization. If I ask questions, she sighs. She looks at me like I am a child. So I just signed. I just wanted to make her happy. I sat back. The pieces clicked into place. This was not just about greed. It was about dominance. Celeste was systematically stripping Martin of his confidence, making him feel small and incompetent, so that he would rely on her for everything. And she was using my money to do it. She was not just stealing my savings. She was rewriting the family architecture in her version of the world. I was the resource. Martin was the dependent, and she was the manager. Dad, I said, I need you to listen to me. That money wasn't a loan. I didn't give it to her. Martin nodded. But he looked away. I know. I believe you. But just let me handle it. I will talk to her. We will pay you back. Just give us time. Do not make a scene. Aubrey, please. He was begging me. He was terrified of the confrontation. I looked at my father. This man who used to lift engine blocks with his bare hands, now reduced to begging his daughter not to upset his wife. Okay, Dad, I said, lying through my teeth. I won't make a scene. I stood up. I kissed him on the forehead. I walked out of the cafe and into the bright, harsh sunlight of the parking lot. I was not going to make a scene. Scenes were messy. Scenes were emotional. I was going to build a trap. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, watching my father through the cafe window. He was staring into his coffee, looking lost. Celeste had made a mistake. She thought she was targeting a jealous stepdaughter. She thought she was stealing from a passive savings account. She did not realize she was stealing from a project manager, and project managers do not just fix problems. We document them, we track them, and then we execute the solution. I put the car in gear. The investigation was over. The project was just beginning. I found Louis Hartman through a referral from a lawyer who specialized in high-asset divorces. He did not work out of a glass tower downtown. His office was located in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a failing chiropractor, a space that smelled faintly of starch and old carpet. But the lawyer had told me that Louis was the man you hired when you wanted to find money that did not want to be found. Louis was a man in his 60s, with skin the color of parchment and eyes that looked like they had spent too long staring at spreadsheets. He did not offer me coffee. He sat behind a desk cluttered with files and gestured for me to sit. You have a messy one, he said. His voice was dry, like rust scraping against metal. I handed him the folder I had compiled, the bank statements, the fake email address, the screenshot of the broker's box. It is identity theft, I said, but it is family. Louis nodded. He flipped through the pages with a practiced thumb. Family theft is the hardest to prove, he said, because it usually does not look like theft. It looks like delegation. It looks like permission. He pulled out the authorization form the bank had provided. Look at this, he said, tapping the paper. The signature is perfect. The IP address is local. The device used matches a profile linked to the household, to a bank algorithm. This is not a crime. It is a Tuesday, but I did not sign it. I insisted. Louis looked up over his reading glasses. I believe you, but the law does not care about what you know. It cares about what you can demonstrate. This is what we call clean theft. It is wrapped in plausible deniability. If you accuse her, she says you authorized it verbally and are now having buyer remorse. She says you gave her the password because you were busy. It becomes, he said, she said, and the money stays gone. He turned to his computer monitor and typed something. However, he said, criminals are creatures of habit, and they are lazy. They reuse pathways. He spun the monitor around. I traced the routing number of the holding account where your $20,000 landed. He said, it is not a standard personal checking account. It is a custodial account managed by a firm called Apex Transaction Management. Apex. I said, I saw that name on a credit inquiry. They are a third-party intermediary. Lewis explained. They handle funds for private sales, escrow bridges, things like that. Basically, they are a bucket where money sits before it goes to its final destination. He clicked a few keys and brought up a new window. Now, look at this. This is the public closing record for your father's house in Briar Hollow. I leaned in. The document was a standard deed recording, dense with legal jargon. Look at the settlement agent, Lewis said. I followed his finger. Settlement services provided by Apex Transaction Management. I felt a cold click in my chest. So the same company that received my stolen money handled the closing on the house. I said. Lewis nodded. Exactly. This was not just Celeste needing cash for a shopping spree. This was structural. Your money went from your savings to the Apex holding account. And I would bet my license that from there, it went directly into the closing costs for 2410 Briar Hollow Lane. It was a direct line. My life savings had been poured into the foundation of that monstrosity of a house. I paid Lewis his retainer in cash and left his office with a new kind of clarity. This was not a random crime. It was a construction project, and like any project, it had blueprints. 2 days later, I drove out to Briar Hollow for the neighborhood welcome event. It was a block party, the kind that looks perfect on social media and feels like purgatory in real life. The humidity was thick enough to chew, and the air smelled of charcoal and expensive perfume. Martin and Celeste were holding court near the buffet table. Celeste was wearing a floral dress that cost more than my first car, laughing at something a neighbor said. Martin was standing slightly behind her, holding a paper plate and looking like he wanted to disappear. I walked up, forcing a smile. Aubrey Celeste cried out when she saw me. She reached out and squeezed my arm. Her grip was tight. I am so glad you came. We were just telling the Millers about the move. Mrs. Miller, a woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde, smiled at me. Your stepmother has done wonders with that place, Mrs. Miller said. And so quickly. It usually takes months to get settled. Celeste laughed, a sound that tinkled like broken glass. Oh, well, we had to be creative. You know how it is. Martin gets overwhelmed with the finances, so I just had to make the numbers work. She glanced at me, her eyes glinting. Aubrey worries, though, she said, lowering her voice just enough for it to feel intimate, but loud enough for the group to hear. She is so intense about money, very by the book. I keep telling her, sometimes you have to spend a little to build a life, right? The group chuckled politely. I stood there, frozen. She was doing it right in front of me. She was taking the reality that she had stolen from me and twisting it into a personality quirk. Aubrey is cheap. Aubrey is anxious. Aubrey doesn't understand how the world works. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I did not snap. I took a sip of my iced tea. I just like to know where the money goes. Celeste, I said calmly. Celeste patted my cheek. Of course you do. Sweetie, and that is why you are still renting that little condo. You are safe. We are just a bit more adventurous. I walked away before I poured the tea over her head. I found a quiet spot near the edge of the yard and pulled out my phone. I needed to cool down. I needed facts. I logged into the county property records portal. Lewis had shown me the deed, but I wanted to see the tax assessment history. I searched for the address, 2410 Briar Hollow Lane, owners Martin Barnes, Celeste Barnes, but then I saw something else. Under the section for lien holders/interested parties, there was a name I did not recognize. Hollow Ridge Developments, LLC. I frowned. Usually, that section listed a bank, Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America. Why was a limited liability company listed as an interested party? I searched the LLC name. It had been formed 6 months ago. The registered agent was a lawyer in a town 3 hours away. I went back to the party. I found Celeste near the cooler. Alone for a moment. Great party, I said. She jumped slightly, then smoothed her expression. Oh, thanks. It is coming together. Isn't it? I leaned against the table. I was looking up the tax codes for the area. Curious about the millage rates, I noticed the deed lists an LLC as an interested party. Hollow Ridge Developments. Celeste's smile faltered. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped, and I saw pure panic. Then it was gone. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand. "That is just paperwork. The house came with some renovation financing attached to the builder. It is a bridge loan kind of thing. We are clearing it up next month." "Renovation financing?" I asked. "But the house is new construction. Why would it need renovation financing?" She shifted her weight. Her eyes darted to the left, looking for an exit. "Well, upgrades," she said. "The custom kitchen, the floors. Look, Aubrey, it is complicated finance stuff. It is boring. Martin and I have it under control." She pushed past me. "I need to go check on the sliders." She was lying. The story made no sense. You do not get renovation financing from a random LLC for a new build, and you certainly do not panic when someone asks about it unless you are hiding the source of the money. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. I put on my best business suit, pulled my hair into a severe bun, and drove to the office of West Creek Title. This was the company whose folder I had seen in the kitchen. The company Celeste had called disorganized. I walked in like I owned the place. The receptionist looked up, startled. "I am looking to buy a property in Briar Hollow." I said, "I understand you handle a lot of the closings there. I have some questions about your escrow structure." A junior title agent came out to meet me. He looked young, eager, and easily intimidated. I sat in his office and asked generic questions for 10 minutes, lulling him into a sense of security. Then I dropped the bait. "My father, Martin Barnes, closed with you guys recently." I said, "He mentioned something about a shortfall rider. He said it was a standard thing for the area." But I had never heard of it. The agent nodded. "Falling for it." "Oh, yes, the escrow shortfall rider," he said. "We use that when the buyer is bringing cash to close, but the funds are in transit. It allows us to close the deal on the scheduled date, provided the remaining balance is wired within 48 hours. It is a way to keep the closing from falling through due to banking delays." I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. So, if a buyer is short, say $20,000 on closing day, they sign this rider, get the keys, and then they have 2 days to find the money. "Exactly," the agent said. "It is high risk, so we only do it with approved transaction partners, like Apex." I thanked him and walked out. The picture was complete. Celeste had been short on the closing costs. She had pushed the deal through using this shortfall rider, promising the money would be there. Then, faced with a 48-hour deadline and the threat of losing the house and her status, she had panicked. She had logged into my account. She had impersonated me. And she had wired the exact amount she needed to fill the hole she had dug. It was a bridge, a temporary bridge made of my savings. And the worst part? She never planned to pay it back, because if she paid it back, she would have to admit she did not have the money in the first place. She was counting on the fact that once the money was in the house, it was family money, and I would be the villain if I tried to take it out. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called Mrs. Higgins at the bank. "Please tell me you have good news," I said. There was a long pause. "Ms. Barnes," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice professional and cold. "We have recovered $2,000 that was still sitting in the Apex holding account. We have returned that to your savings. 2,000. I repeated, "Out of 20? What about the rest?" "The rest has been dispersed," she said. "It is gone. And I have to be honest with you. The fraud investigation is hitting a wall." "A wall." "The authorization looks too legitimate," she said. "We have the IP logs, the signature, the two-factor authentication. Our legal department is saying this looks like a civil dispute between family members, not third-party fraud. Unless you can prove criminal intent like a police report or a confession, we are likely going to deny the full reimbursement claim." I felt the phone slip in my sweaty palm. "So that is it?" I asked. "I just lose $18,000 because she knew my password. I am sorry." Mrs. Higgins said, "We are still investigating, but you should prepare yourself." I hung up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Briar Hollow and throw a brick through that custom stained glass window. But I did not. I called Martin. Dad. I said when he answered, "We need to talk. The bank is not giving the money back." There was silence on the line. Then a heavy sigh. "Aubrey," he said, "I know. Celeste told me." "She told you?" "She said there was a problem with the bank." He said, "Look, honey, I know this is messy. I know you are hurt. I am not hurt." "Dad," I said, "I am robbed. There is a difference." He lowered his voice. "Aubrey, please, can we just let it go?" For now I froze. "Let it go." "We are finally happy," he said. "The house is great. Celeste is happy. If we start digging into this, if we start fighting, it is going to ruin everything. Can't we just say you loaned us the money? We will pay you back. I promise. I will pick up some extra shifts at the garage. Just do not make this a war." I listened to his voice. It was the voice of a beaten man. He knew what she had done. Deep down, he knew, but he was more afraid of the conflict than he was of the theft. He was willing to sacrifice my security to buy his peace. That was the moment the last tether snapped. I realized then that Martin was not my ally. He was a hostage. And you cannot save a hostage who has fallen in love with the captor. "Okay, Dad," I said. My voice was eerily calm. "Okay," he asked, sounding hopeful. "I won't make it a war." I said, "I just want you to be happy. Thank you." "Honey," he said, relief flooding his voice. "Thank you. You are a good daughter." I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of my car, staring at the brick wall of the title company office. I was done fighting the bank. The bank was a machine. It followed rules, and Celeste had played by the rules of the machine perfectly. I was done fighting Martin. Martin was a casualty. I needed to change the battlefield. Celeste had used professionals to hide her theft. She used a broker, a title company, a transaction firm. These people were not family. They did not care about Martin's happiness or Celeste's status. They cared about their licenses. They cared about liability. If I accused Celeste, she would cry and manipulate. But if I cornered the professionals, if I made them realize that they were accomplices to a felony, if I made them see that the clean paperwork was actually a prison sentence waiting to happen, they would not protect her. They would throw her to the wolves to save themselves. I started the car. I was not going to be the victim anymore. I was going to be the whistleblower. I drove back to my condo and called Louis Hartman. "Louis," I said, "I want to pivot. Pivot to what he asked. We are not going after the money." I said, "We are going after the deal. I want to know everything about Jason Miller, the broker. I want to know everything about that title agent, and I want to know exactly who is behind Hollow Ridge Developments." There was a pause, and then I heard the rustle of papers. "Now you are thinking like a predator." Louis said, "I like it." I hung up and walked to my whiteboard. I wiped away the timeline of the bank transfer. Instead, I wrote 3 names. Jason Miller, West Creek Title, Hollow Ridge Developments. Celeste thought she had built a fortress, but she had built it on a foundation of favors and shortcuts. And I was going to find the loose brick that would bring the whole thing down. The invitation arrived in my mailbox on thick, cream-colored cardstock that felt heavy in my hand. It was embossed with gold foil script that read, "A new chapter, the Barnes Housewarming." It was not just a party, it was a coronation. I looked at the date. It was 2 weeks away. I logged onto social media, a place I usually avoided, and searched for Celeste's profile. It was public. Of course. She had been busy. There were photos of the new patio, the custom drapes, the oversized front door with a wreath made of dried lavender. The captions were all variations of the same theme, blessed. Finally home, hard work pays off. She was building a narrative. The house was not just a structure. It was proof of her validity. She was using the brick and mortar to cement her status in Briar Hollow, to show the world that she and Martin were successful, happy, and solvent. Image was her armor. If she looked rich, no one would ask where the money came from. If she looked like the perfect wife, no one would believe she had robbed her stepdaughter. I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the invitation. I could burn it. I could refuse to go. I could send a legal notice, but I knew that would fail. If I attacked her from the outside, she would just play the victim. She would tell the neighbors that I was jealous, unstable, and trying to ruin her happiness. She would circle the wagons, and Martin, out of misplaced loyalty and shame, would stand right beside her. No, I had to be inside the walls. I picked up my phone and dialed Celeste. She answered on the second ring, her voice wary. "Hello? Aubrey." "Hi." "Celeste," I said. I tried to make my voice sound tired, beaten, but compliant. "I just got the invitation." "Oh," she said, the wariness replaced by a guarded optimism. "Yes, we were hoping you would come. It would mean a lot to your father." I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of corporate negotiation training I had. "I will be there," I said. "And listen, Celeste, I have been thinking about what Dad said, about letting things go." I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her nervous. Then filling it, "I am tired of fighting." I lied. "You are right. Family is complicated, and if this house makes Dad happy, then I want to support that." I could practically hear her shoulders drop through the phone line. "Aubrey, that is so mature of you," she said. "I knew you would understand eventually. We just want what is best for everyone. I want to contribute," I said. "Since I can't, since the money situation is what it is, I want to give you guys a proper housewarming gift. Something for the party." "Oh, you do not have to do that," she said, her voice dripping with false modesty. I insisted. "No, I want to. I have a contact who installs those high-end security bundles, the ones with the smart locks and the perimeter cameras, and it comes with a digital art wall for the living room. You know, those screens that look like canvas, you can display family photos during the party." Celeste gasped. I knew I had her. She loved technology that looked expensive, and the idea of displaying family photos, curated images of her perfect life, was irresistible to her. "That sounds amazing," she said. "The digital wall. Can we load it with pictures from the wedding and the move?" "Anything you want," I said. "I will come over early on the day of the party and set it up. I will handle the installation myself so you do not have to worry about technicians tracking mud in the house." "Aubrey, thank you," she said. "Really, this is a fresh start for us." "A fresh start," I repeated. "Exactly." I hung up. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the lie. She had accepted the Trojan horse. I called Lewis Hartman immediately. She took the bait. I said, "Good," Lewis rasped. "Now, let us make sure we stay on the right side of the law." I met Lewis at his dusty office the next morning. We went over the plan detail by detail. "The digital frames," Lewis said, pointing a bony finger at me. "You cannot record audio without consent in a private residence. That is a felony in this state." "I know." I said, "No recording. The cameras are strictly external security. The frames inside are output only, and the content he asked, I laid out the flash drive. Everything on here is my property." "Lewis, emails sent to me, bank statements with my name on them. Public records I downloaded from the county site. Photos I took in public spaces or in the house with permission." Lewis nodded slowly. "If you own the documents, and you are displaying them on equipment you own and gifted, you are technically just sharing a slideshow. It is aggressive." "Aubrey, but it is legal. It is a story," I said. "I am just telling the story of how the house was purchased. I spent the next week building the presentation. I bought 3 high-definition digital frames, the kind that cost $600 each and looked like museum pieces. I synced them to a central hub I could control from my phone. I loaded the first hour of the loop with the photos Celeste had sent me. Wedding photos. Pictures of Martin grilling, shots of the new garden. It was saccharine and warm. Then, I built the second playlist. It started subtle. A photo of the closing date, a timeline graphic. Then, the documents, the authorization form with the forged signature, the email confirmation sent to the fake address, the timestamp of the withdrawal matching the timestamp of the wire transfer to the title company. I timed it to match the flow of a party, cocktails, laughter, then the slow creeping realization that something was wrong, but the frames were just the backdrop. I needed an audience. I called Nadia. I need guests. I said, Nadia was already ahead of me. She had hacked, or rather, socially engineered her way into the neighborhood homeowner association email list. I can get the neighbors, she said, but you want the players, right? I want Jason Miller. I said, the broker, and I want someone from Apex Transaction Management. How do you get them to a housewarming party? Nadia asked. Greed. I said, tell them Martin is looking to invest in more properties. Tell them there will be high net worth individuals there. Tell them it is a networking opportunity. Nadia laughed. You are evil. I love it. She drafted the emails. She made them sound official, coming from Martin's personal email, which she had access to because she had helped him set it up years ago. Subject: investment opportunities, celebration. 2 days later, we got the RSVPs. Jason Miller was coming. A regional manager from Apex named Simon Vance was coming. And, as a stroke of luck, Nadia found out that the woman living 3 doors down from 2410 Briar Hollow was a loan officer at the local credit union. We made sure she got a personal invitation. 2. I had the stage. I had the actors. Now I needed the critic. I reached out to Tessa Rowe. She was a journalist for a regional paper who had written a few stinging pieces about predatory lending in the chaotic housing market. I met her at a diner off the highway. She was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and a skepticism that rolled off her in waves. You said you have a tip about title fraud, she said, not touching her coffee. I do, I said, but I can't give you the names yet. I want you to come to a party. She raised an eyebrow. A party? I am not a society columnist. It is not a society event, I said. It is a closing. I am going to show you how a local broker, a transaction firm, and a shell company are moving money around to bypass lending laws. You will see the documents. You will see the people involved. Tessa studied me. She was looking for the crazy. She was looking for the vendetta. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because they took $20,000 from me. I said, and nobody believes me because the paperwork looks perfect. I want you to see how they make it look perfect. She tapped her pen against the table. If it is a bust, I leave, she said. If it is real, I run it, but I do not burn sources, and I do not print lies. Fair enough, I said. I gave her the address and the time. Everything was moving into place. I felt a strange, cold calm settling over me. I was not sleeping well, but when I was awake, I was hyper-focused. Then, Celeste pushed back. It was a Wednesday, 3 days before the party. I was at my desk at work, reviewing a project timeline for a client, when my boss, Karen, knocked on my doorframe. Aubrey, do you have a minute? She asked. Her tone was different. Usually, Karen was brisk and professional. Today, she sounded concerned. I followed her into her office. She closed the door. That was never a good sign. Is everything okay at home? She asked. Sitting on the edge of her desk, I frowned. Yes. Why? Karen sighed. She picked up a piece of paper from her desk. We received a call this morning. She said, it was anonymous. But the woman claimed to be a concerned family member. She said she was worried about your stability. My stomach dropped. Stability. She said you have been under a lot of financial pressure. Karen continued, watching my face closely. She claimed you were in debt and that you had been making erratic threats against your family. She wanted to know if we had noticed any concerning behavior at the office. I sat very still. Celeste. She was not just satisfied with the money, she was preemptive. She knew I was investigating. She had seen me at the title company. She had sensed the shift in my demeanor and she was striking first. She was trying to discredit me. If I exploded, if I accused her, she could point to this and say, see, I told you she was unstable. I even called her boss to try and get her help. It was vicious. It was designed to destroy my livelihood. I looked at Karen. Karen, I said, keeping my voice steady. My father recently remarried. His new wife and I are having a disagreement regarding a family financial matter. It is personal, and I am handling it through legal channels. I am not in debt. I am not unstable. And I am horrified that she would bring this into my workplace. Karen studied me for a long moment. She had known me for 5 years. She knew I was the person who color-coded spreadsheets and never missed a deadline. "I did not think it sounded like you," Karen said softly. "But I had to ask. It is HR policy when we get a call like that. I understand." I said, "I would like to formally document this conversation, and if she calls again, I would like the number logged." Karen nodded. "Done. Take the rest of the day." "Aubrey, you look pale." I walked out of the office. I did not go home. I went to my car and screamed. I screamed until my throat felt raw. She had crossed a line that I did not think she knew existed. She had attacked my career. I pulled out my notebook. I wrote down the date and time, anonymous call to employer, allegations of instability. I added it to the file. It was another brick in the wall I was building around her. That evening, I went to Martin's house. I needed to install the brackets for the screens. Martin was in the kitchen, eating a sandwich over the sink. He looked startled when I came in. "Aubrey," he said, "you are here early. Just prepping for the party." "Dad?" I said. He put the sandwich down. He looked older. The stress of the move and the secret he was keeping was eating at him. "Why are you doing this?" he asked suddenly. I stopped, holding the drill. "Doing what?" "Being so helpful," he said. "The gift, the party. Last week you were talking about lawyers. Now you are hanging pictures. It does not make sense." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I put the drill down. "I am doing it because I want my life back, Dad," I said. "And because I hate seeing you like this." Like what he asked defensively. Like a man who is afraid to ask his wife a question. I said, like a man who signs things without reading them because he is scared of being called stupid. "You taught me to be careful. Dad, you taught me to measure twice and cut once, and now you are letting someone cut your life to pieces with a dull knife." Martin flinched. "She loves me," he whispered. "I know she tells you that." I said, I picked up the drill again. "I am not here to fight, Dad. I am just here to hang the frames." He watched me for a moment, then turned and walked out of the room. He did not argue. He did not defend her. He just retreated. The day before the party, Louis called me. "I found the smoking gun." He said, "I was in my living room, testing the slide transition speed on the digital frames." "Tell me." I said, "Holleridge Developments," Louis said. "The LLC listed on the deed." I pulled the articles of incorporation. The registered agent is a lawyer. Like I said. But I dug into the operating agreement. The principal member is a man named David Hollow. "Who is David Hollow?" I asked. "He is a real estate investor from Florida," Louis said. "But here's the kicker. 10 years ago, he ran a business in Sarasota. His partner in that business was a woman named Celeste Vance." "Vance." I said, "Wait, the guy from Apex Transaction Management, the one coming to the party, his name is Simon Vance." Louis chuckled dryly. "Probably a cousin or a brother, but Celeste Vance is your stepmother's maiden name, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. "Celeste Barnes, formerly Celeste Vance." "So," Louis continued, "Celeste is not just buying a house. She is buying a house with an LLC owned by her old business partner." And I looked up David Hollow's history. He flips distressed properties. He buys them, puts a coat of paint on them, and resells them within 6 months at a markup. My blood ran cold. "They are not staying," I whispered. "No," Louis said. "This isn't a forever home. Aubrey, this is a flip. She used your $20,000 as the gap funding to close the deal. They are going to stage it, live in it for a few months to avoid capital gains if they can swing it, or just eat the tax and sell it. And when they sell it," I asked, "the proceeds go to the owners." Louis said, "Martin and Celeste get their share, but Holleridge gets the equity stake. And since your $20,000 isn't recorded as a loan, it just disappears into the profit margin. You were seed money, Aubrey. You were the venture capital for their flip." I stared at the wall. if they refinance next week, or if they sell in 3 months. The paper trail gets buried under a new deed. The money is washed. Exactly, Lewis said. Once they refinance, the original closing logic is wiped clean. You have to stop them before the ink dries on the next set of papers. I hung up. The stakes had just shifted. This wasn't just about recovering a theft. It was about stopping a machine. Celeste was using Martin as a straw buyer, using my money as liquidity, and using the house as a vehicle to funnel cash to her old partner, and poor Martin thought he was building a legacy. He was just a tenant in his own mortgage, waiting to be evicted when the profit margin hit the right number. I looked at the digital frames. They were glowing softly on my table. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. The housewarming party would happen, the guests would arrive, the champagne would flow, and I would burn the house down. Not with fire, but with the truth. I packed the frames into boxes. I packed the power cords. I packed the thumb drive. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like a victim anymore. I looked like a project manager who had found a critical failure in the system and was prepared to initiate a hard reset. I went to bed, but I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, rehearsing the timeline. Arrival 4:00 p.m., setup 4:30 p.m., guests arrive 6:00 p.m., the toast 7:00 p.m., the reveal 7:05 p.m., 5 minutes. That was all it would take to turn a celebration into an indictment. I closed my eyes and saw Celeste's face. I saw the way she had looked when she snatched the folder. I saw the way she had smiled when she accepted my gift. She thought she was the chess master. She thought I was just a pawn. She forgot that the pawn is the only piece that can turn into a queen if it makes it across the board. And I was 1 square away. The crack in their armor appeared on a Thursday morning, arriving not with a bang, but with a sterile, polite ping from my email inbox. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold, staring at the subject line, confidential settlement proposal, without prejudice. It was from the legal department of Apex Transaction Management. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I opened it. The text was draped in heavy corporate speak, designed to intimidate and placate simultaneously. They claimed that while they admitted no liability and stood by their verification processes, they valued their community reputation and wished to resolve the misunderstanding regarding the funds transferred from my account. They were offering me $5,000. Attached to the offer was a 5-page non-disclosure agreement. If I signed, I would get the check, but I would be permanently barred from discussing the transaction, the transfer, or Apex Transaction Management with anyone including regulatory agencies or the press. I leaned back, a cold smile touching my lips. They were terrified. You do not offer $5,000 to a stranger because of a misunderstanding. You offer it because you have reviewed the file, seen the IP logs, realized your compliance officer was asleep at the wheel, and you want to bury the body before the autopsy begins. I typed my reply immediately. I did not send it to their legal team. I sent it to Simon Vance, the regional manager who was on the guest list for the party. Mr. Vance, I am in receipt of your offer. I reject it in its entirety. My counteroffer is simple. I require the full return of $20,000 and a corrected paper trail admitting that the authorization was fraudulent. I will not sign a confidentiality agreement. If this is not resolved, I will continue my investigation with the State Licensing Board. Regards, Aubrey Barnes. I hit send. I knew they would not agree. That was the point. I needed them to come to the party sweating. I needed them to realize that I was not looking for a payout. I was looking for the truth. I printed the email offer and added it to the stack of documents destined for the digital frames. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Martin. Aubrey, he said, his voice breathless. I just got a call from Celeste. She is hysterical. She says you are threatening the transaction company. She saw the email. Of course. Simon Vance must have called her immediately, asking why her stepdaughter was going nuclear. I am not threatening anyone. Dad, I said calmly, I am negotiating. They offered me $5,000 to shut up. I told them no. There was a silence on the line, heavy and suffocating. 5,000, Martin asked. His voice was small. Yes. Aubrey, that is, that is a lot of money, he said. You could replace your savings with that. Well, a quarter of it. Why didn't you take it? I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose, because it comes with a gag order. Dad, if I sign it, I can never tell anyone what she did, and I don't get the rest of my money back. Martin sighed. It was a sound of deep, exhausted resignation. But it would be over, he said. We could stop fighting. We could just be a family again. Celeste is sick over this. She is in bed with a migraine. She says she just wants peace. I felt a sharp, hot spike of anger in my chest. But I forced it down. I kept my voice steady, conversational even. Dad, I have a question for you. What he asked. Why is peace always purchased with my future? The line went dead silent. I waited. I let the words hang in the air between us. Why? Dad, I repeated. Why is the price of your happiness always my bank account? Why is the cost of keeping Celeste calm always my silence? You want peace. I get that. But why do I have to pay for it? Martin did not answer. I heard him breathing. Ragged, shallow breaths. I do not think of it like that, he whispered finally. I know you don't. I said, but that is what it is. I hung up. I did not slam the phone. I placed it gently on the counter. He needed to sit with that. He needed to feel the weight of it. The next morning, Celeste texted me. Brunch. Just us girls. Please, I want to make this right. I agreed, not because I wanted to eat quiche with the woman who stole from me, but because I needed to see her face. I needed to see how good the mask was. We met at a bistro in downtown Harbor Glen, a place with white tablecloths and overpriced mimosas. Celeste was waiting for me in a corner booth. She looked fragile. She was wearing a soft beige sweater and minimal makeup, her hair pulled back loosely. She looked like a woman who had been crying. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. She reached for my hand across the table. I did not pull away, but I did not squeeze back. I am here, I said. Celeste took a deep breath. Tears instantly welled in her eyes. It was impressive. Aubrey, I am so sorry, she choked out. I never meant for it to get this messy. You have to believe me. I watched her. What exactly happened? Celeste. She dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin. It was Martin, she said. He was so stressed about the house. We were short at the closing. Just a little short, and he was too proud to ask you. He said, Aubrey has worked so hard. I can't ask her for money. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. So I tried to fix it. She said, I thought if I just borrowed it, just for a few weeks, I could pay it back before you even noticed. I was trying to protect his pride. Aubrey, I was trying to save him from feeling like a failure. She sounded so sincere, the tremble in her voice. The way she framed it as an act of love for my father, it was masterful. For a second, just a split second, I felt a twinge of doubt. Was I being too hard on her? Was she just a desperate wife trying to hold it together? Then she kept talking. And it is such a good investment, she said, leaning in. The appraisal came in at $450,000. We have instant equity. Once we refinance next week, I was going to write you a check for the full $20,000 plus interest. I swear. I froze. $450,000. That was the appraisal value. In a real estate transaction. The appraisal value is a tight secret until the very end. The buyer knows, the lender knows, and the agents know. But Martin had told me the house cost $380,000. If the appraisal was $450,000 and they bought it for $380,000, that meant there was $70,000 of equity sitting there. But more importantly, Martin had never mentioned an appraisal. Martin didn't even know what an appraisal gap was. Celeste knew the numbers. She knew the exact valuation. She wasn't a passive wife trying to help her husband. She was a real estate operator running a spread. You are refinancing next week, I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Yes, she said, wiping her eyes. Monday. We have a lender lined up. That is why I need you to stop the investigation with the bank. Aubrey, if the account is flagged for fraud, the refinance won't go through. And if the refinance doesn't go through, I can't pay you back. There it was. The leverage. She wasn't sorry. She was blocked. She needed my fraud claim gone so she could wash the money through a new loan. I understand. I said, I will think about it. I stood up. You aren't staying for food, she asked, looking panicked. I have to get back to work. I said, thank you for telling me the truth. Celeste. I walked out of the restaurant. My hands were shaking, but this time it was with rage. She had sat there and lied to my face, using my father's pride as a shield, all while calculating her equity position. I drove straight to the parking lot of the real estate office where Jason Miller worked. I did not go inside. I called his cell phone. Mr. Miller, I said when he answered, this is Aubrey Barnes. I am outside your office. Mrs. Barnes, he stammered. I am actually in a meeting. No, you aren't. I said, I can see you through the window. You are sitting at your desk staring at your phone. You have 5 minutes to come out here and talk to me, or I walk in there and ask your broker of record why you processed a closing with stolen funds. He was outside in 3 minutes. He looked worse than Celeste. His cheap suit was wrinkled, and he had sweat stains on his collar. He looked like a man who had not slept in a week. Ms. Barnes, look, I didn't know, he started, holding his hands up. Cut the crap. Jason, I said, I know about the shortfall rider, I know about Apex, and I know you let Celeste use a forged authorization to bridge the gap. It wasn't forged, he insisted, his voice pitching high. She told me you knew, she said. Aubrey is on board. She just can't come to the signing because of work. She provided the documents. She provided the documents, I repeated. How she uploaded them to the portal, he said. I stepped closer to him. I want the metadata. Jason, what I want the upload log. I said, I want to know exactly what device was used to upload that authorization form. He hesitated. That is confidential client data. I laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. You are worried about confidentiality, Jason. You are an accessory to wire fraud. If I give this file to the state board, you lose your license. If I give it to the police, you lose your freedom. Give me the log. And maybe I forget to mention your name when I talk to the district attorney. He crumbled. He pulled out his phone, logged into his transaction management app, and scrolled frantically. Here, he said. Turning the screen to me, I looked at the entry, document auth _form _signed, .pdf uploaded, October 14th, 2:15 p.m., source device, Apple iPhone 14 Pro Max, device ID iPhone _Celeste_B. I pulled out my own phone and took a photo of his screen. Thank you, Jason. I said, wait, he said, grabbing my arm. You said you wouldn't report me. I looked at his hand on my sleeve until he let go. I said, maybe, I replied. See you at the party. I sat in my car and looked at the photo. iPhone _Celeste_B. It was undeniable. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a mistake. It was Celeste, using her own phone, confident that no one would ever look this deep. I forwarded the photo to Mrs. Higgins at the bank. I added a text message, proof of device origin. The authorization was uploaded from the suspect's personal phone. Not my device. Reopen the claim. Mrs. Higgins replied 10 minutes later. This changes things. We are moving this to the escalated fraud unit. But Ms. Barnes, the recovery process takes time. We cannot stop a third-party transaction instantly. I knew that. The bank was a slow-moving giant. They would get there eventually. But not before Monday. Not before the refinance. I called Lewis. She is refinancing on Monday. I said, I was afraid of that. Lewis said, she is cashing out. If she gets that new loan, the $20,000 she stole becomes part of the previous mortgage payoff. It gets washed. The new lender won't care about the old dispute, so I have to stop it before Monday. I said, you have to stop it on Saturday. Lewis said, at the party, I hung up. The sun was setting over Harbor Glen. I drove back to my condo and walked into my living room. The boxes with the digital frames were sitting on the table. I unpack them. I plug them in. The screens hum to life, displaying the default landscape of a mountain range. I sat down at my computer and opened the presentation file. I had the wedding photos. I had the cute pictures of the dog. I had the shots of the garden. And now, I had the rest. I dragged the new files into the playlist. Slide 1, the settlement offer from Apex. $5,000 to remain silent. Slide 2. The text message from Jason Miller's phone showing the upload from iPhone_Celeste_B. Slide 3. The appraisal value. Celeste mentioned at brunch. Slide 4. The email confirmations sent to the fake address. I arranged them carefully. The loop would run for 2 hours. For the first hour and 45 minutes, it would be nothing but joy. Smiles, toasts, flowers. Then, at 7 o'clock, right when the speeches were scheduled, the tone would shift. I programmed the transition. It would not be jarring. It would be a slow fade. A slide that said, "The story of our home," and then, the evidence would begin to play. Each document on the screen for 10 seconds, long enough to read, long enough to understand. I sat back and watched the simulation on my monitor. It was brutal. It was a public execution. My phone buzzed. It was Nadia. "Everything's set for tomorrow," I typed back. "The trap is set." "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked. "Once you start this, you can't stop it. Martin might never forgive you." I stared at the screen. Martin, my father, who was so afraid of conflict that he was letting his wife cannibalize his family. If I did this, if I humiliated Celeste in front of her friends and business partners, Martin would be collateral damage. He would be the husband of a fraud. He would be the man who couldn't control his house. I thought about the conversation we had had. Why is peace always purchased with my future? He had not answered. I realized then that I could not just blow up the room. That would be vengeance. And despite everything, I did not want vengeance. I wanted justice, and I wanted my father back. I needed to give him a choice. I picked up the phone and called Louis again. "Louis," I said, "I am changing the plan slightly." "Don't tell me you are backing out," he growled. "No," I said, "the frames go up, the documents run. But I'm not going to narrate it. I am not going to stand there and point fingers. Then what I am going to let the room read it," I said, "and when the truth comes out, I am going to look at Martin, and he is going to have to decide. He can either stand with her and claim it is a lie, or he can stand with me and admit he knows. You are rolling the dice." "Aubrey," Louis said, "he is a weak man. He might throw you under the bus to save face." "Maybe," I said, "but if he does, then I know. Then I can walk away and never look back, but I have to give him one last chance to be my father." I hung up. I spent the rest of the night checking the cables, testing the Wi-Fi connection on the hub, and polishing the glass screens of the frames. I slept for 3 hours. I woke up before dawn on Saturday. The sky was a bruised purple. The day of the party. I dressed in a pair of dark jeans and a black turtleneck. I looked like a stagehand. I looked like someone who was there to work, not to celebrate. I loaded the car. The frames were heavy. I drove to Briar Hollow. The house looked peaceful in the morning light. The driveway was empty. I punched in the code for the garage door. Celeste had given it to me so I could set up early. I walked into the kitchen. It was silent. The counters were already prepped with trays for the caterers. I went to the living room. I found the studs in the wall. I mounted the brackets. I hung the frames. They looked beautiful. Sleek, modern, expensive. I plugged them in. I synced them to my phone. I started the playlist. The first photo appeared. Martin and Celeste cutting their wedding cake. They looked happy. I watched it for a moment. It was a lie, but it was a pretty one. I paused the loop on that image. I went back to the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee. Celeste came down the stairs an hour later. She was wearing a silk robe and a face mask. "Aubrey," she chirped. Startled. "You are here early. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect." I said. She walked into the living room and gasped. "Oh, look at them," she exclaimed. "They are gorgeous." She stared at the wedding photo. It really ties the room together. Doesn't it? She said. It tells a story. I said. She smiled at me. A genuine, warm smile. She thought she had won. She thought the settlement offer, the brunch, the tears she thought she had managed me. She thought I was back in the fold. Thank you, Aubrey, she said. This means so much to us. You are welcome, I said. I finished my coffee. I will be back at 6. I said. I have to go change. I walked out of the house. As I drove away, I checked my phone. The app showed the status of the frames. Status online. Playlist. The underscore truth. Start timer 6 o'clock p.m. The fuse was lit. I went home and showered. I put on a dress. It was navy blue, simple, conservative. I put on my pearls. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was 33 years old. I was a project manager. I was a daughter. Tonight, I would find out if I was an orphan. I drove back to Briar Hollow as the sun began to dip below the tree line. The street was already lining up with cars. Luxury SUVs, sedans, a few sports cars. The guests were arriving. I parked down the street. Away from the valet, I wanted to walk in. I saw Jason Miller getting out of his car. He looked nervous, adjusting his tie. I saw Simon Vance, a man I recognized from his LinkedIn profile, walking with the swagger of someone who controls the money. I saw Tessa Rowe, the journalist, slipping in the side gate with a group of neighbors. She caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. I walked up the driveway. Martin was at the door, greeting people. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. When he saw me, his face lit up with relief. Aubrey, he said, you came. I told you I would. Dad. He hugged me. He smelled of aftershave and anxiety. Everything is going to be okay. Right? He whispered in my ear. We are going to be okay. I pulled back and looked at him. I looked at the lines around his eyes. The gray in his beard. I loved him. I loved him so much it hurt. That depends on you. Dad, I said softly. He frowned, confused. I walked past him, into the house. The lights were dimmed. The music was playing softly. The champagne corks were popping, and on the wall, the 3 digital frames were cycling through photos of smiling faces, ticking down the seconds until the smile would be wiped away. The air in the living room smelled of roasted garlic, expensive perfume, and the crisp, cold scent of fresh lilies. It was the smell of money, or rather, the smell of what money was supposed to look like. The house was packed. 60 people, maybe more, were squeezed into the open-concept ground floor. There were neighbors from the homeowner association, men in blazers holding glasses of scotch, and women in cocktail dresses who were already busy posting videos of the decor to their social media feeds. A jazz trio was playing softly in the corner, innocuous and pleasant. I stood near the archway leading to the kitchen, holding a glass of sparkling water. I was wearing the navy dress I had chosen specifically for its invisibility. It was clean, tailored, and completely unmemorable. I did not want to be the center of attention. I wanted to be the operator. Celeste was everywhere at once. She was wearing a shimmering gold dress that caught the light every time she moved. She looked radiant. She looked like a woman who had pulled off the heist of the century and was now taking her victory lap. She was laughing with the bank manager's wife, touching Martin's arm possessively, guiding guests toward the buffet. Martin looked different. He was smiling, shaking hands, playing the role of the proud homeowner. But his eyes were darting around the room with a nervous, restless energy. He was waiting for the other shoe to drop, even if he did not know what the shoe looked like. I watched Jason Miller, the broker, standing by the fireplace. He was nursing a drink and looking sweaty despite the air conditioning. He kept checking his phone. Simon Vance, the representative from Apex Transaction Management, was more confident. He was chatting up a local developer, handing out business cards, using my father's house as a showroom for his own services, and in the corner, leaning against a bookshelf with a glass of red wine, was Tessa Rowe. She blended in perfectly. She wasn't holding a notepad. She wasn't taking photos. She was just watching, her sharp eyes cataloging every interaction. The digital frames were currently cycling through the first playlist. A photo of Martin and Celeste on a boat, a shot of the garden in full bloom, a candid of the two of them laughing at a dinner table. Guests were stopping to admire them. "Oh, look at that resolution," I heard Mrs. Miller say. "It is like they are right here in the room." Celeste breezed past me, smelling of jasmine. "Aubrey," she whispered, squeezing my arm. "You are behaving beautifully." "Thank you." She didn't wait for a response. She moved to the center of the room and clinked a spoon against her champagne flute. "Everyone," she called out, her voice melodious and projected perfectly. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." The room quieted. The jazz trio stopped playing. All eyes turned to Celeste. She beamed, basking in the attention. "Martin and I just want to thank you all for coming," she said. "Moving is never easy. Merging lives, merging histories. It takes work. But standing here tonight, surrounded by friends and family, I can honestly say it was worth every penny." She laughed, and the room chuckled with her. "We are just so blessed," she continued, "and I want to give a special thank you to my stepdaughter. Aubrey." She gestured to me. The room turned. I felt 60 pairs of eyes on me. "Aubrey has been adjusting," Celeste said, a note of patronizing sweetness in her voice. "But she put together this beautiful digital display for us tonight. It is her way of welcoming us home. Aubrey, come say a word." She was daring me. She was pulling me into the spotlight, thinking I would be forced to play the good daughter to avoid a scene. She thought the social pressure would gag me. I walked to the center of the room. I stood next to her. I did not smile. I took the remote control from my pocket. It was small, sleek, and black. "Thank you." "Celeste," I said. My voice was calm. It did not shake. I looked at Martin. He was smiling at me, a hopeful, desperate look on his face. He wanted this to be real. He wanted the lie to be true so badly. I turned to the guests. "My father taught me that a home is built on a foundation," I said. "He used to tell me that if the foundation is cracked, it does not matter how nice the paint is. Eventually, the house will fall." I paused. The room was silent. People were nodding, thinking this was a metaphor. "So, for my gift, I wanted to show you the foundation of this house." I said, "I wanted to show you exactly how we got here today. Because the truth is a rare thing in Briar Hollow." I pointed the remote at the main hub on the wall. I pressed the button. The wedding photo on the screens dissolved. The music did not start. The screens went stark white. Then, black text appeared. October 14th, 2:15 in the afternoon. The guests murmured, confused. They thought it was an artistic choice. Then, the first document faded in. It was the bank transfer notification. It was blown up to high definition. You could read every line. Withdrawal, $20,000. Source, Aubrey Barnes. High yield savings. Destination, Apex Transaction Management. Custodial account. I heard a gasp from the back of the room. I did not look. I kept my eyes on the screen. The slide changed. The authorization. The forged form appeared. The signature was highlighted in a red box. Next to it, I had placed a graphic of the metadata I had extracted from the broker's system. Upload source iPhone_Celeste_B. Location 2410 Briar Hollow Lane. The room went deadly quiet. The polite cocktail chatter died instantly. This wasn't a montage. This was evidence. I saw Jason Miller freeze. He was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. He recognized the form. He recognized the metadata layout. The slide changed again. The cover-up. The email from Apex Transaction Management appeared. The settlement offer. Offer $5,000. Condition confidentiality agreement. No admission of liability. I looked at Simon Vance. The color had drained from his face. He lowered his drink slowly to the table next to him. Celeste let out a sound that was half laugh, half shriek. "Aubrey," she said, her voice high and brittle. "What is this? Is this a joke?" "Turn it off." She lunged for the remote in my hand. I stepped back. I did not raise my voice. It is not a joke. Celeste, I said, it is the receipt. I pressed the button again. The motive. The screen shifted to a complex diagram. It showed the property deed. It showed the lien holder Holleridge Developments, LLC. Then it showed the articles of incorporation for the LLC. Principal member David Hollow. Past Business Association, Sarasota Flipping Group. Partners David Hollow. Celeste Vance. The text on the screen was brutal. Refinance scheduled Monday, November 3rd. Objective equity stripping and debt consolidation. The murmuring in the room turned into a buzz. People were pulling out their phones. They weren't filming the decor anymore. They were filming the screens. They were filming Celeste. Martin walked forward. He moved like a man wading through deep water. He looked at the screen. He looked at the LLC document. Holleridge, he whispered. You told me that was the bank. You said it was a bridge loan from the bank. Celeste grabbed his arm. Martin, don't look at it. She hacked the system. She is trying to embarrass me. She is jealous. Look at her. Martin shook her off. It was a small movement, but it was violent in its rejection. He pointed at the screen, at the date of the upload. October 14th, he said. His voice was shaking. That was the day I was at the dentist. You said you were going to the library to return books. I don't remember. Celeste stammered. Martin, please, everyone is watching. Martin turned to her. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was a profound, crushing disappointment. You used your phone, he said. It says it right there. You uploaded her signature from your phone. It is a lie, Celeste screamed. She turned to the crowd. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly desperation. She fabricated it. She has been out to get me since day one. She is greedy. She is upset because I have a son and she doesn't want to share the inheritance. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She is unstable, she shouted. She is in financial trouble. I tried to help her. I offered to pay her bills. And this is how she thanks me. By humiliating us. I stood still. I let her scream. I let her show them exactly who she was. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke up. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a knife. It isn't a fabrication. Ms. Barnes, Jason Miller, the broker, stepped forward. He looked terrified. He was looking at Tessa Rowe, who had just raised her phone to record him. He knew who she was. He knew that if he lied now, while a consumer protection journalist was watching, he would go to prison. Jason. Shut up, Celeste hissed. No, Jason said, holding his hands up. I am not going down for this. I am not losing my license. He looked at Martin. She told me Aubrey approved it. Mr. Barnes, Jason said. He was sweating profusely. She gave me the documents. She said Aubrey was busy and couldn't sign in person. I didn't know she stole the login. I just processed the paper. Martin stared at him. You processed a forgery. I thought it was a family arrangement, Jason pleaded. She pressured me. She said if we didn't close by Friday, she would take the deal to another broker. I just wanted to get it done. Simon Vance, the Apex rep, made his move. He set his glass down and turned toward the front door, trying to slip away unnoticed. Nadia was already there. She stepped in front of the door, crossing her arms. She wasn't big, but she looked immovable. Excuse me, Simon said, trying to push past her. Not yet, Nadia said. She held up her phone and snapped a picture of him. Close up. Unflattering and clear. Simon Vance. Right, she said loudly. Apex Transaction Management. Simon flinched. I think the State Banking Commission is going to want to know why your company offers hush money to fraud victims. Nadia said. She pointed to the screen, where the settlement offer was still glowing. Simon looked at the screen, then at the neighbors recording him, and he slumped against the wall. Defeated. The room was in chaos. People were whispering, pointing, backing away from Celeste as if she were contagious. Celeste looked around. Her armor was gone. The image she had carefully crafted the wealthy. Benevolent matriarch was shattered. She looked small. She looked vicious. She turned to Martin. She tried one last tactic. The tears. Martin. She sobbed, reaching for him. I did it for us. I did it so we could have this house. I did it because I love you." Martin looked at her. He looked at the house. He looked at the marble countertops, the silk curtains, the crystal chandelier. He looked at the things he had thought were a legacy. And then he looked at me. I was standing alone by the digital wall. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I was just waiting. Martin took a step back from Celeste, then another. He created a physical distance between them, a gap that felt like a canyon. He walked over to me. He stood in front of me, ignoring the 60 people watching, ignoring the camera phones, ignoring the ruin of his social standing. He looked at the screen again, at the bank withdrawal. $20,000. He whispered. I nodded. He closed his eyes for a second, and a tear leaked out, tracking through the wrinkles on his cheek. I didn't know. "Aubrey," he said. His voice was thick. "I swear to God. I thought I was just signing closing papers. I know." "Dad," I said, "I know you didn't steal it, but you let her hold the pen." He nodded. He opened his eyes. He looked at Celeste, who was now standing alone in the center of the room, her face a rictus of shock. He turned his back on her. He looked at me. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. It wasn't a theatrical question. It was quiet. It was the question of a man who was ready to surrender his pride to save his child. I took a breath. This was it. The negotiation. "I want my money back. Dad," I said, "all of it, before the refinance happens on Monday." He nodded. "Okay, we will sell the cars. We will sell whatever we have to. You will get a check tomorrow. And," I continued, "I want you to go to the bank with me on Monday morning. I want you to sign an affidavit stating that you did not authorize that transfer and that you were unaware of the source of funds." Martin winced. That would mean admitting on public record that his wife was a criminal. He hesitated for a second. Just a second. Then he nodded. "Yes, I will do it. And one more thing," I said, what I pointed at the screen, at the timeline of lies. "I want the truth." I said, "I want you to stop pretending that this is a happy family. I want you to stop asking me to pay for your peace. If you stay with her, that is your choice. But you do not get to bring her to my house. You do not get to ask me to dinner with her. The wall goes up today, and it stays up." Martin looked at the floor. He looked at his hands. Then he looked up at me. "Okay," he said. "Okay, Aubrey." It was done. Celeste let out a scream of pure rage. "You ungrateful little brat," she shrieked. After everything I did, she started toward me. Her hands curled into claws. Nadia stepped forward. Tessa Rowe stepped forward. Even Mrs. Miller, the neighbor with the helmet hair, stepped forward, blocking Celeste's path. Celeste stopped. She looked at the wall of people defending me. She looked at Martin's back. She realized, finally, that she had lost. She spun around. She grabbed her purse from the side table. She pulled out her phone and held it to her ear, whispering frantically as she walked toward the side door leading to the garage. "I am leaving," she yelled over her shoulder. "Do not expect me back." The door slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed through the silent house. No one moved for a long time. Then, slowly, the party began to dissolve. It wasn't a normal departure. There were no goodbyes, no thank yous. People just left. They set their drinks down on the expensive coasters. They picked up their purses. They walked out the front door, whispering, checking their footage, eager to get home and tell the story of the housewarming from hell. Jason Miller slunk out the back, looking like a man who was about to vomit. Simon Vance followed him, shielding his face with his hand. Tessa Rowe walked up to me. She handed me a card. "I have everything I need," she said quietly. "Call me on Monday if you want to give a formal comment. Otherwise, I run it with the public records and the footage." "Thank you," I said. She nodded at Martin, then walked out. Eventually, it was just me, Nadia, and Martin. The house was quiet again. The smell of the food was starting to turn, heavy and cloying. Martin walked over to the sofa and sat down. He slumped forward, putting his head in his hands. He looked small in the cavernous room. He looked like a guest in a hotel he couldn't afford. Nadia touched my shoulder. "I will wait in the car," she said. "Take your time." She left. I stood there in the living room. The digital frames were still running. The loop had restarted. It was back to the wedding photos. Martin and Celeste, smiling, cutting the cake. I unplugged the master cord. The screens went black. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the street. I saw the taillights of the last guest's car disappearing around the curve. I looked at the house I was standing in. I looked at the walls that had been painted with my savings. I looked at the floorboards that had been laid with my security. I had won. I had exposed the fraud. I had reclaimed my father. I had stopped the machine, but standing there, watching my father weep silently into his hands. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a demolition. I walked over to him. I didn't hug him. I didn't tell him it would be okay, because I didn't know if it would be. I just sat down in the chair opposite him. "So," I said, "what do we do now?" Martin looked up. His eyes were red. He looked around the empty, beautiful, stolen house. "We pack," he said, and for the first time in months. I believed him. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey into the quiet, devastating nature of financial betrayal. And I hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below and let me know which part of the story hit hardest for you. If you enjoyed this and want more narratives about justice, family secrets, and the long road to truth, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you for being here.